Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about the comments made by Kaja Kallas regarding the United States and the EU. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I've come across an article where Kaja Kallas has stated in an interview that the United States is trying to divide Europe, says EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas. Now, she cited, recent uh, issues that the EU has had with the US and vice versa. And she's mentioned that this has happened especially under the current Trump administration. Now, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that the EU, that the US are trying to divide the EU. That's common knowledge. In fact, if you look at all the statements made by J.D. Vance, by Donald Trump, where Donald Trump spoke at I think it was Davos about Europe becoming unrecognizable and Europe having to walk back some of the policies it has implemented in the last 10 years, where J.D. Vance said that free speech was under attack in places like the UK as well as in Europe. And when you look at the push for Greenland, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to, if you have nothing to say, better to shut up and sit down. But once again, this woman goes on to demonstrate her moronity. And then she goes on to make the laughable suggestion that the EU are actually strong when they get together. That is a load of hogwash. The EU cannot decide on what day of the week it is, let alone anything else. They've got help that they've been funneling money and funds, EU funds, to Ukraine. How united are they when Robert Fico of Slovakia and Viktor Orban of Hungary have vetoed the 90 billion aid package that Ursula von der Leyen was so excited to deliver to Zelensky himself, but had to hold back on it because of the veto by Hungary and Slovakia. So how united are you there? What have you done when France, when Macron was talking about standing up to the United States? You couldn't even get together a team to agree on that. Macron has gone and sent ships to French vessels to the Mediterranean. The British have no clue what's going on. They're still deciding whether they have a fleet or not, let alone sending anybody there. One day the Americans can use the base, the next day they can't, the next day they're sending a ship, the next day they're not. So where is this EU solidarity that she talks of? Because honestly, I don't see it. The German populace are sick and tired of having to fund and bail out the rest of Europe. There's a scramble between the French and the Germans. They were going to develop their own indigenous fighter jets. And how well did that take off? The Germans had to now rethink and maybe look at purchasing more F-35s from the United States. So how exactly do you figure, or does Kaja Kallas figure, that the EU are a real block of solidarity? Because from where I'm sitting, they look like the most divided bunch on the planet. The differences are stark. Just try and tell the Polish that you're going to let Ukrainian farmers start exporting everything into Poland and that you're going to decimate the Polish farming industry. See what happens there. Again, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out that the Americans are trying to break up the EU, and they will be successful. They don't. In fact, she is so deluded. She doesn't realize that you don't need the Americans to do that. Europe is breaking itself up with its stupid policies and stupid doctrines, with the rampant theft, with the squandering of assets, with the wastefulness of its resources and its money investing in policies that go nowhere. Just look at the German energy crisis. That is laughable. The Germans, growing up as a child, I remember German engineering. You had respect, Mercedes Benz, BMW, if it was a German engineered vehicle, you knew it was solid. To see the Germans embrace policies where they're shutting down nuclear reactors, then they're coming out and saying that they have an energy crisis. It was wrong. Nuclear power is still bad, but we're going to invest in smaller nuclear reactors. And somehow that's going to, you don't expect people with this level of intelligence coming from these types of societies that have contributed so much to humanity by way of, engineering, medicine. You don't expect them to start behaving like these buffoons on the world stage. It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. Again, I go back to Senator John Kennedy's statement that, Britain was founded by geniuses, but is led by a bunch of morons at the moment.
I want to talk about our friends in the United Kingdom, and they are our friends. I love the people of the United Kingdom. I do. I went to school there for a while. They're wonderful people. They deserve better than the government that they're being given right now. I don't mean any disrespect in saying this, but I'm not a big fan of the Prime Minister Starmer. The United Kingdom was founded by geniuses, but at the moment it's being run by idiots.
Kaja Kallas coming out and saying that the United States wants to destroy Europe. Yes, of course they do. But you know what? Here's a shocker for you. You don't need the United States to destroy Europe, because you lot of incompetent idiots are doing a perfect job all on your own. The United States is just steering you on gently. They're massaging you into that position because you have no problem destroying Europe yourself. What you've allowed to happen to Europe is unforgivable. And then you want to now, you see the victim mentality. You've destroyed Europe, but it's the Americans' fault. You see, your inability to look at what you've done wrong and then project it on somebody else, because there always needs to be a boogeyman. Up until now, up until Donald Trump, the boogeyman was always the Russians. So I want to thank you for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Please remember to like, share and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and it helps our channel to grow.